Okay. The first thing I want to talk about is Eruv Tavshillin because we learned the sugya just now and it's relevant this year. So the main Hilchos Pesach, unless anyone has any questions, I just want to talk about Eruv Tavshillin and then some ideas about the Seder. Okay, so Shulchan Aruch says um, when Yontif falls on Erev Shabbos, you can't cook for Shabbos by itself, but you can cook a bunch of pots of food for Yontif, and if you have leftover, you can make over for Shabbos. But through an Eruv Tavshillin, then you can cook just for Shabbos. So it appears to be the Ramah. I'm not positive about that. So the explanation of the Indian of the Eruv. So again, Eruv means mixing up. So when you have Eruv Chatzeros, you have people in different houses within the same courtyard are being mixed up into one unit. Um, and so mixing up that you're cooking and baking from Yontif for Shabbos with what you're cooking and baking from Erev Yontif for Shabbos. So you didn't start any malacha on Yontif, you only finished it, but you already started. So that's why you have to start it from before Shabbos. And the Ramah says you could even do it bein hashmashos. Um, we need to use bread and cooked food or matzah and cooked food. And if you only did it with the cooked food, it is mutter to even to bake. But if you remembered before it was nighttime, you should take the take challah or matzah in our case and make the declaration that with this you can bake for yantif. The amount of the cooked food is a kazayas, whether it's for one person, whether it's 1,000 people, and we said, and whether you could and initially take only a kazayas, or you could have a more than a kazayas. But if people are eating the food, you need to have at least a kazayas left in order for you to keep cooking. And the Ramah says l'chadchila you should have at least an egg's worth of bread, and that is the minhag l'chadchila. So I don't know if that we need like a mishnah, but we always use two matzahs, and maybe the reason is in case to make sure there's two kazesa. Um, the cooked food has to be something that you would eat with bread, and so it couldn't be something like daisa, some type of grain, because you don't eat grain with bread. We saw that Gemara, the Bavliim were foolish that they ate starch with starch. We said in the Gemara, the cooked food it could be roasted, it could be cooked very long time, it could even be pickled or smoked. It could either, we said, these little fish that all you have to do is pour hot water on them and they cook. So it's a very little cooking process. That could be the cooked food. And you could even use baked tapuchim, probably means apples, um, because the Beis Yosef didn't have potatoes yet. Uh, I mean, he was alive when Columbus. I don't know, but I don't know how much the trade came back, and they actually brought all this tobacco and potatoes and stuff back to the old world. If that Beis Yosef would have thought about so, um, but even cooked fruits that don't need um to be cooked, but the Magen Avram says the Mishnah Berurah brings down it has to be stuff that you usually eat with bread. So people don't usually eat kompot with bread, so that wouldn't necessarily count. But if there's some type of stuff, but simis is used with the main course, so simis would probably be okay. Yeah, so it was cooked, right? Even though you didn't cook it, but yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, so even though you didn't cook it, but yeah. But depends what your minhag is. It's a mitzvah to everyone to make their own eruv, and it's a mitzvah for the gadol of the city to make an eruv for all the cities. So anyone who forgot or there was some type of unavoidable incident that prevented them, or if they made an eruv and then it got lost. But if someone could have made an eruv and didn't, and he only wants to rely on the eruv of the of the gadol ha'er is called negligent, and he's can't be fulfilled. So with it, so if someone knows they always forget nowadays, it's an alarm on your phone to help you remember. That's certainly helpful. Or it would make more sense to tell someone else and give them some money towards it and say, do it for me too. Because that way you're not being negligent, you're not forgetting. When you're doing it for someone else, you don't need to say for Shmir Barrel and Chaim Pipik, but you just say, it says anyone in the city, and as long as you're within the Tchum. No. No, because a goy could cook. They don't need an Eruv Tavshillin, but meaning if I don't have to have particular people in mind. I say whoever's in the city, if I'm making it for everyone in the city, I can have in mind everyone in the city. We'll skip a couple of those. Oh, here's an interesting thing. The person who's doing it on behalf of other people, I don't know why it says specifically. So some of these halachos about making the eruv, the Shulchan Aruch is kind of references back to the law of making the eruv chatzeros in Hilchos Shabbos. There's an eruv and an eruv. There is similarity. So the person who's doing it for other people needs to lift. So probably it would apply for himself also. You should lift it up a tefach from the ground. So if you're on the table, you should lift it above the table. That's what they're. So it happens to be similar to Kiddush. Kiddush, you're supposed to lift the becher up. A tefach, so it's about 4 inches above. So you should hold it 4 inches above your counter or your table, wherever you're making the Eruv Tavshillin. So some of these halachos, there are halachos. The Gemara doesn't necessarily mention this detail, but Rishonim mention them, and so that's right. We have to see what the Rishonim and the Shulchan Aruch says, not just the stuff that we learned in the Gemara is going to say. But again, sometimes Rishonim limit it or say that it's only talking about a certain situation. So, okay. So you make the bracha al mitzvos eruv, and you say, this is Aramaic, but you could say it in any language. With this, it'll be permitted to us to bake and to cook and to insulate foods and to light a candle and to do all of our needs from Yantiv for Shabbos for me. And if you're doing it for other people, you could list specific other people by name. Like if you're doing it to a few people, ask you to, so you're not to go to the area, you're not doing it for the whole city, but you can mention other people or l'chol erazos. And if you don't know Hebrew, you could say it in any foreign language that you understand. Okay. Even if you left Eruv Tavshillin, you're not allowed to cook from the first day of Yantif to Shabbos. So this is the state. So besides for making the person who says it, so with an Eruv Tavshillin, you shouldn't cook on Thursday for Shabbos. It's allowing us to cook on Friday for Shabbos. Now for Shavuos is on Friday and Shabbos. In that case, you're not allowed to cook on the first day of Yantif because that's the only day of Yantif. But when there's 2 days of Yantif, you're not allowed to cook on the first day of Yantif for Shabbos. It allows you to cook on the second day, on Friday. Okay. Now with the practice, I would say most people if cook on the second day of Yom Kippur for Shabbos, it's already pre-done. Did they make it an Erev Yantif? Did you already make it an Erev Yantif?
No. Yeah, she makes all the food.
Right. So the thing is, though, is that if you want to warm it up, what allows us to warm it up, because that's on Shabbos, you wouldn't be allowed to warm it up, or you'd have to warm it a certain way. So even that preparation, you wouldn't be able to do without the Eruv Tavshillin. So even if you're not cooking from scratch, but to warm up, and that's why I put in the announcements in the newsletter with the Eruv Tavshillin, you set up everything on the blach the way you would do for Shabbos before Shabbos. So the Eruv Tavshillin does allow you to do that.
If we have a timer set for
Yeah.
Do we need Eruv Tavshillin?
Yeah. Because again, you have to. Well, what time? So on Friday afternoon, Friday morning. So whatever would be the law of cooking for Shabbos, like, so it would have to be cooked already at least halfway through Michael Ben Drusai by the time Shabbos starts. The way that you would always cook for Shabbos. Whenever you cook for Shabbos, it has to be at least halfway done when Shabbos starts. So the same way that you would the same way that you would cook on a regular Friday, it has to be that much done when Shabbos starts, when Friday's a Yantif. But yeah, you would need an Eruv Tavshillin for that.
Piece of matzah and some food to be eaten on Shabbos.
We're going to talk about that. Yes, you need to eat that on Shabbos. Yeah. So this is relevant to Erev Chatzeros, and not. But so listen to this halacha. If you made an Erev Tavshillin, to rely on it as long as it stays okay. So let's say use a box of matzah, even for another yantif l'chadchila, you shouldn't rely on it for another yantif, but b'diavad you can. So this year you're going to keep your box of matzah from Erev Tavshillin for Shabbos and for Pesach and for Shavuos. You shouldn't, but if you did, it's okay. Now it wouldn't apply for the tavshil. I don't know how the tavshil unless you have salami or something.
You have to eat it.
Yeah, but if it's a box of matzah, there's still plenty more. Okay, so this is important halacha. If it got eaten or it was lost before you cooked for Shabbos, you're not allowed to cook for Shabbos unless there's at least a kazayas left. After you prepared the needs of Shabbos, you can eat it. So once you're done cooking on Erev Yantif, you're technically allowed to eat it, but later on it says, okay. Hold on. Okay, well. So I mean, I'm going in order of Shulchan Aruch, but it's going to say that something, and I'm going to talk about this for the Hagaddah also. But because you did a mitzvah with the let's say the matzah of the Eruv Tavshillin, something that you did a mitzvah with before, we want to do more mitzvahs with. So you should use it as your. Oh wait, maybe the Mishnah person. So you should use it as your Lacha Mishnah for Friday night and for Shabbos day, and eat it at Charoses. That's what. Did the Mishnah Berurah say that? Said that. Yeah. Oh, so the Mishnah Berurah on this halacha says l'chadchila, it's proper that you should leave that as the Lacha Mishnah for Friday night, and for Shacharis and Mincha you should eat it. Since you did one mitzvah with it, you should do more mitzvahs with it. So it should be your Lacha Mishnah for it. So that's what the Mishnah Berurah says. Who does he bring it from? The Taz and Magen Avraham in the name of the Marshal, the Amshel Shlomo. What?
The Mishnah is supposed to be for each meal.
Right. So meaning the Erev Tavshillin matzah should be your Lacha Mishnah for Friday night, and don't eat it yet, and for Shabbos day, and don't eat it yet, and then Shal Shudas who eat it. So that's what's proper to do. But you could eat it Friday night, and there's no problem, because once your food has been cooked and you're done cooking on Yantif, you could eat the Erev Tavshillin. So if you want to eat it Friday night, you're allowed to, but the Amshel Shlomo mentions this idea of, since you did one mitzvah with it, you should do more mitzvahs with it, so you should use it as your Lacha Mishnah. And again, Lacha Mishnah is, there was a Tosefta about it right at the beginning of Beitza. So Lacha Mishnah is because double portion of the man fell, so there's a Shaila, Rishonim talk about it. It's not a great answer. Well, at Shalashudas, they wouldn't have had a second portion because that was their last portion of it. So even though in the midbar it's unlikely they had the double portion for Shalashudas, we use Lacha Mishnah for Shalashudas also. I guess unless you want to hold the opinion that you don't need to wash at all for Shalashudas, but and then there's a machlokas if why the man wasn't able to fall on Shabbos. Is it like harvesting because it was connected to the ground? So if it's like harvesting, then on Yantif it wouldn't have fallen either, because you can't pick stuff from a tree or vegetables on or harvest on Shabbos either, on Yantif either. there's a machlokas. What's the reason on Yantif? Some say if you would only do a small amount, it theoretically would okay, but when you harvest wheat or whatever, you usually harvest much more than you would just need for Yantif. So there's a machlokas we've shown him. We mentioned the beginning, and I think we'll see it at the beginning of the third parak or the fifth parak. I don't remember where it is right now. Maybe Daf Lamed Gimel or something. But we're not allowed to pick produce from the tree, from the ground on Yantiv either. So the Tosefta himself concedes there's conflicting midrashim if mun fell on Yantif or not. So if mun fell on Yantif, there shouldn't be a need for Lechem Mishnah on Yantif. But the minhag is, but there's no, we don't know, there is no conclusion of whether the mun fell on Yantif or not. So we do use Lechem Mishnah on Yantif also. But this Lechem Mishnah he's talking about is only talking about Shabbos. The Yamshel Shlomo was an Ashkenazi, so I don't know if Sephardim, in regard to what? Lechem Mishnah? I don't think there's a difference. If you cooked, but if you baked but didn't cook, or you cooked and you didn't bake, and the Eruv Tavshillin got eaten or lost, that which you made when the Eruv was still existent, even if you wanted it for Yantif, you can make that. You could, so what you already cooked, save that for Shabbos and just cook more for Yantif, because you're allowed to cook for Yantif on Yantif. So if you cooked something partially and then the Eruv Tavshillin got lost, the stuff you make, you'll keep that for Shabbos, and the rest of the stuff you do will be for that day of Yantif. If someone did not make an Eruv Tavshillin, it's a machlokas if you're allowed to light a candle, even though you're not cooking, because in the Eruv Tavshillin declaration, we say to bake and to cook, to do our needs, and to light a candle. So if you didn't do that, I mean, obviously we're talking about transferring, but the second opinion is that we shouldn't do it, and we would pass in like the second, with the second opinion, the final opinion that the Mechaber brings. The Mishnah Berurah points out that to light the candle, you don't need an Eruv Tavshillin, according to that opinion, and according to that, you don't mention to light a candle when you're making the Eruv Tavshillin declaration. Oh, and that's the Beis Yosef name of the Rif and the Rambam. So he mentions some Ashkenazi Achronim also, but it's clearly from the Sephardi Rishonim. This we saw recently. If someone didn't make an Eruv Tavshillin, just like he can't cook for himself, other people can't cook for. He can't cook for other people, even if they had an Eruv Tavshillin. And so we said he has to be makna his food for other people, and they can cook, and then he can eat. But it's so this also we had mentioned. I think Tosefta mentioned a different way, and the Mechaber passing is like the simple explanation, the first explanation that we learned in the Gemara over there. If you remembered that you didn't make an Eruv Tavshillin before you cooked for the morning meal, it's in the morning already before lunch, so you should just cook a lot. You could cook extra in the same pot. You can't cook a separate pot for Shabbos. You didn't make an Eruv Tavshillin. You could cook extra in the Yantif, and you could have a lot of leftovers for Shabbos. Some say you could even cook in many pots, since you haven't eaten yet. You could do that, but you have to eat at least something from each of the different dishes for on Yantif. And then if you remembered on the first day of Yantif that you forgot to make an Eruv Tavshillin, if it's Rosh Hashanah, you're out of luck. But if it's a different Yantif, you can make it tonight. That you could say, if today is Yantif, if today is really the suffix, so it's not really Yantif yet, I can make an Eruv Tavshillin now, and I'll be able to cook tomorrow for Yantif. And if today is really Yantif and tomorrow isn't, it's really Chol Moed, so I don't even need an Eruv Tavshillin. So you can make it the Eruv Tavshillin on Yantif, on the first day of Yantif with the Tanai. We saw that in the Gemara. If he intentionally cooked many dishes not for Yantif, for Shabbos without an Eruv Tavshillin, you are allowed to eat them, but the Beis Din can punish him, says the Mishnah Berurah in the name of the Shita Mekubetzes. But if you made a trick to make 2 dishes for today and you didn't eat anything from the first one, you're not allowed to eat from one of them. You're not allowed to eat that dish on the other day because without the Eruv Tavshillin, because you did it as a harama, as a you tried to make a trickery plan and doesn't work. Okay. So okay, so so now talking about certain aspects of the Seder. So we mentioned that Eruv Tavshillin, because you did a mitzvah with the Eruv Tavshillin, I mean it's a rabbinic mitzvah, but you should use the challah, the matzah as your lechem mishnah on Shabbos. That's a halacha we said. So this is the wrong place. Oh, so the Gemara in Arvei Pesach Medaf Kuf Ches Amid Beis says the Chachamim established 4 kosos to drink 4 kosos at the Seder as a way of acting like free people. So on everything you should do 1 mitzvah. So the first mitzvah so besides for the first kos we also make Kiddush, and I think we mentioned that according to some try to say from a Rashi and Rosh Hashanah Daf Chav Tes that Kiddush and Yantif is midrabanan, but from a Gemara in Shavuos Daf Yud Gimel, the Maritz Chayes says that Rashi holds that that Kiddush and Yantif is midiraisa. So whatever, it's a machlokes if Kiddush is diraisa or dirabanan. The Rambam in Hilchos Avodah Zarah seems to say that Kiddush and Yantif is midiraisa also. That seem to see so whether it's 2 derabanan, whatever, but you do on the first kos we make Kiddush, and the second cup we do Sipur Tzias Mitzrayim, and the third cup we do benching, and the fourth cup we finish Halal. So we do an additional mitzvah with each cup. So that's similar to the idea of using the Eruv Tavshillin matzah for your lechem mishnah. But there is a principle though, and the exact interplay between these is a little confused. So before I say that, when Moshe hit the rock, so some Rishonim say Moshe hit the rock because earlier Hashem told him to hit the rock, take the mata and hit the rock with it. And then in this time in Shlach, when there was no water after Miriam died, Hashem said, go to take your staff and talk to the rock. So Moshe thought because Hashem told him to take the staff, he should hit it like he did last time. But Hashem didn't say hit it. He said take it. So why did he say take it? So the Charoses Haran says when a miracle happens, if something that was involved with an earlier miracle is around, it makes it like easier to happen this time. So because the staff, the miracle happened through hitting the rock with that staff, having the staff here, it would be easier for the miracle to happen this time, and you wouldn't even need to do as much physical effort in actually hitting the rock, but just talking to the rock in the present with the staff that the miracle had already happened through, it would be easier. So that's in regard to miracles. It's not in regard to mitzvos, but it seems to be some similarity according to the Charoses Haran about that. But there is a different principle that does not seem to fit so well with this principle, and that is ein osin mitzvos chavilos chavilos. We don't want to do mitzvos in bundles. meaning it's because if you make mitzvahs in bundles, it looks like you're trying to get it over with quickly. So it's not clear exactly when we say you're doing multiple mitzvahs at once and when we say, oh, it's nice to do a second mitzvah with this. So in regard to the arbakosos, the Chachamim made arbakosos, and they say on each one do one other thing. So maybe because there's a limit of the additional mitzvah we do, that is saying we're not trying to bundle our mitzvahs together just to get them over with faster. Maybe that's the answer, maybe it's not. But what's interesting is that there's a Tosefos and Brachos specifically talks about this because so we use 3 matzahs. So normally what we do according to what the Hagaddah say is you hold the 3 matzos. So I'm not doing what I'm talking about. I'm not doing in Seder of the Hagaddah, but hopefully we'll say some things about things earlier than Motzi Matzah. But from this idea, it's related to Motzi Matzah. We take the 3 matzahs, and the middle one is broken. Oh, so normally we need to make Hamotzi on 2 full matzos, having shlemos, 2 full matzos, 2 full breads or 2 full matzos. But part of Sipur Tzias Mitzrayim is that we have to be like poor people to remember the slavery, and so therefore we have a broken matzah because poor people don't necessarily have a full loaf for their bread. So, but we use 3, and reason we use 3 is because the broken one is hidden. It's literally sandwiched, is the word they use, korchan, from the word korech, inside the 2 full matzahs. After we make the bracha of Hamotzi, we drop the bottom matzah, and then we make the bracha of al mitzvos, al achilas matzah on the full matzah and on the broken matzah. We usually keep the broken matzah on the bottom. Now, but Rav Yashaber followed the minhag of the Vilna Gaon, is that he would put the broken matzah on top for making the bracha, not the way that our Haggadahs usually say, but that's the minhag Agra. So Tosfos in Brachos in the 6th parak, talking about that, says in the name of Rav Yosef Tovelim, we are not supposed to make Hamotzi and Achilas matzah from the broken matzah because it's like making mitzvos in bundles. But Tosfos himself asked on that and argued and says, because it's just Hamotzi, it's the bracha of Hamotzi is a bracha to eat, and the bracha of al achilas matzah is a bracha on mitzvah. So you're allowed to make. So it's not like doing 2 mitzvahs on the same thing. So according to that, and this goes into different things, and back into the Rashi, there was a mention about the Kiddush. I didn't mention that part, but the Gemara there talks about that too. Is the bracha of Hagafen and Kiddush part of the Kiddush, or is it also just you're going to drink the Kiddush, so you need to make a bracha on the food, and then Kiddush is the mitzvah? Or according to Rabbi Yosef Tovelim, is Hagafen also part of the brachas mitzvah, and then it's a problem of you're doing 2 mitzvahs on the same cup. You're making the Hagafen bracha and but you could split it up a little bit, or say that the question wouldn't be according to Rav Yosef Tovelim, because Rav Yashaber here in a few places talks about the fact that we have an obligation to make a Seuda. Shulchan Aruch is one of the parts of the Seder. We have to have a Seuda. So in order to have a Seuda, you have to have Hamotzi. So you could say that the bracha of Hamotzi might be a mitzvah on the Seuda, a bracha for the Seuda, and that wouldn't help for Kiddush. And the Hamotzi and the al achilas matzah is on the mitzvah specifically of eating matzah. You could potentially say that, but Yosef Tovelim clearly doesn't say that. So Rav Yashaber points out the second lashon and the second opinion Tosfos holds that Hamotzi excuse me, that the first opinion holds that on that's what I'm saying it in the wrong way, but the svara I said is true that there's a mitzvah of making the hamotzi also at the Seder. Rabbi Asher said because to fulfill the poor man's bread, and so the hamotzi also is fulfilling that din. Okay, but then I was thinking, and then there's also something else we do, and with the idea of once you did a mitzvah with something, we do another mitzvah with it, and that is the people who save their lulav all year, to then bake the matzahs with it. Now it's not exactly that baking the matzah isn't a mitzvah, but obviously you have to bake the matzah in order that you'll have matzah for the Seder. But because you did a mitzvah with the lulav, now we're using it towards the fulfillment of another mitzvah, which is baking the matzah. Okay. Second thing about the brach of Shechiyabu. Oh, before I go on, does anyone have any halacha questions about preparing for Pesach for this year? Okay, if you have questions later, you could ask later. Okay, so the second idea. So Rav Yashabir talks about, so some asked, why don't we say Shechiyabu at the Seder? It's a bit of a good question because whenever something comes once a year, or only several times a year, we make a Shechiyabu. And the Megillah, each Yantif is its own Shechiyabu. Sipur Tis Mitzrayim is that night, so why don't we make Shechiyabu on that? So a lot of Rishonim answer that the Shechiyabu we make on Kiddush covers Kiddushes for Yantif, and so it covers all the things for Yantif, including the Sipur Tis Mitzrayim, telling the story of the Exodus, and for the matzah and the maror and all the other special mitzvahs of the night. Some Rishonim, if a slightly different question, say, why don't we make a bracha on halal if that's a mitzvah? And they say, and this would, according to the opinion that you say halal and shul, you already made halal, the bracha on halal and shul covers this also. And I think I mentioned maybe some other times is that according to the way, which Rishon is it? I don't remember right now. One of the Gaonim, that the halal that we start out with, and Moshe spoke about it last Sunday, the recording didn't work. Something on my end didn't work out, but he said some of these ideas in earlier years is that the halal we say at the end of Magid is a spontaneous reaction to just being free. So when something's spontaneous, you don't make a bracha. Making a bracha shows that it's planned to a certain extent. So that halal can't use a bracha. And so you could say is that even though the halal after benching is, as the Brisker Rebbe explains, I forget, I think it was one of the Gaonim, that's Torah's Kriya, it's not a spontaneous reaction, but it's something that's planned to now recognize the historical event, where Moshe was talking about the Vilna Gaon's opinion. But it could be that once in the same few hours, you made a spontaneous declaration of halal, which obviously has no bracha. You wouldn't need to make a bracha on the Torah's Kriya, because it's true that's Torah's Kriya and it's not the spontaneous reaction. But once you just made it, you shouldn't need to make another bracha when you're saying more halal. True, right. So that answer would only go according to the opinion of the Sfardim that you do, and Reb Chaim's opinion was that you should say it also. He felt that the halacha that Ashkenazim should pass like the Beis Yosef in that situation also. Because of that, his son Ramosha, our Ramosha's grandfather, he wouldn't go to shul on Yantif, so they didn't have a suffix brachos. Because if you would be at shul, then you definitely would have to say halal according to what his father said. So I think he didn't go. Well, I think he didn't go to shul to not have the shaila. Ramosha's grandfather, Ramosha, because his father, Reb Chaim, felt that it was a real obligation. Some people also think that you split it up. They're splitting it up. Well, it is split up, right? So, well, that's a different child. We don't do it on the beginning of the Omer either. So one opinion is if it would be a one action, to do a mitzvah, then you'd say Shechiyabu. But because it's 49 different parts, that there's no Shechiyabu.
I know, okay, so some people say Kiddush, but that's most,
But the Ran at the end of Pesachim says, because Sfiras Omer is a sad mitzvah, it's to remember the base of Mikdash when it was built, and the fact that we don't have the base of Mikdash, that it's only no the Rambam. Well, it's a machlokas Rishonim why we count Omer. Of course, some say it's only when you actually bring the korban, and so nowadays it's only rabbinic. But we make Shechiyabu on rabbinic mitzvahs like Chanukah and Megillah. But the Rambam paskins that it is the Eraisa, and they say, why don't you make? So it says because it's to remember that we don't have a base of Mikdash. So it's a sad thing. You don't make a Shechiyabu on a sad thing. So that's a different answer for Sfiras Omer. So Rabbi Yashabir said there's a Tosefta in Brachos. That mentions so the Avudram in his second explanation says the reason we don't make Shechiyabu for a Sipur Tziyas Mitzrayim and for Matzah and Maror is because when we say Asher Gealanu, so the bracha at the end of so if it's on page 27 in the Maxwell house, that's the bracha right before we drink the second cup. Bless you, Hashem, the King of the world. Asher Gealanu that you redeemed us and redeemed our forefathers, our fathers from Mitzrayim, and you let us reach vehigiyanu this night to eat matzah and maror. Say similarly, you should let us reach other festivals and times. So the Avudram says that saying vehigiyanu is a type of Shechiyabu because the Tosefta in Brachos says, so the Gemara in Brachos in Sukkah talks about the bracha of Shechiyabu Kiman v'Giyanu L'zman Hazeh, but the Tosefta in Brachos mentions that the text is Baruch Shechiyabu L'zman Hazeh, not that Shechiyabu. So some Rishonim say that this text of vehigiyanu is, according to the Tosefta, a bracha of Shechiyabu. So this bracha, which counts for the Shechiyabu as a Shechiyabu, it doesn't have the word Shechiyabu means you kept us alive, but vehigiyanu you made us reach. You reached this point. So that's the Shechiyabu for matzah and maror. And that's why we mentioned vehigiyanu lacho matzah maror. So that's the Shechiyabu. It's going specifically on the matzah and maror. Rabbi Yashabir went into more details about that, but that's an interesting idea that I didn't remember from before. Have you heard that before? It's a new idea, right?
Yeah.
Okay, another idea about, so I mentioned before that the bracha of Hamotzi is, so part of the mitzvah and one of the elements of the Seder is having the Seuda, so there's a special element of Seuda for Pesach night, and in one time what Rav Yashabir said at different times, they don't all fit together at different. But at one time it seems that he said that the reason that the Seuda is a mitzvah is because that the Seuda is the main part of leaning. Now we know that we're supposed to lean when we eat the matzah, when we eat the korech, for all four cups. For the first two cups, it's ma'akev. If you didn't, you have to drink it again. For the last two cups, you should lean, and if you didn't, you don't re-drink them, but you should have leaned. but the main leaning, he said, is at the Seuda. So to show our derech cheros that we're acting free by reclining, that's at the Seuda. So that's at one time what the Rav Yashaber said, the importance of the Seuda. So I mean, it's true. We're eating a lot of matzah. We ate the matzah. We ate the mar. We ate the korech. We have to eat the afikomen. Even if you're not so hungry, but there is an element, you really should still make some effort. And I know it's difficult. So I wrote, I think it was 6 years ago, the COVID year, how Rabbi Eugene spoke about on Shabbos, we have to make our physical act into a spiritual act. So it's true that we're not, no, that you have to, that the physical act, you're doing it because it's a mitzvah. You're eating because you have to fulfill the mitzvah. So it's a separate issue. So I mentioned a couple months ago in the Beit Share that I found this year some stuff in Parshas Bereishis about Neshama Yisera. So for years I've known about the Avudraham says the wise, according to him, Chazal had a sense of humor. That why do we have a mitzvah shal shudas? So we don't eat too much at lunch. If you eat too much, you won't be hungry shal shudas. So that's why there's a mitzvah shal shudas to remind you to not eat too much. But other Rishonim say that we have a neshama yaser, so we're able to eat extra on Shabbos. So there's some say, isn't there a neshama yaser on Yom Tov? So some say yes, some say no. There's no. It's kind of like what I mentioned, 30 minutes ago. Did the month fall on Yom Tov? We don't really know. So we don't necessarily know if there's a. It seems from Havdalah, the fact that we don't use Basamim after Yom Tov makes it sound like there's not a Neshama Yisera, because according to the opinions that we use Basamim after Shabbos is because the Neshama Yisera leaves, and so we need to. It's almost like smelling salts. So according to that practice, it seems that we don't have Neshama Yisera. I think Tosefta at the beginning of our Pesachim, mentions some different possibilities about that, but. So even though we don't, you may not want to eat, you should make an effort to eat something at the Seder to make sure you have a Seuda, so we could show our derech cheros. But in a different place, at a different time, Rav Yashaber said that you fulfill part of the mitzvah of Sipur Tzias Mitzrayim, or vehigiyanu with Sipur Tzias Mitzrayim with the Seuda. Why did he say that? He said that because that we do it this way, that we take away the Seder plate before Manishtana and bring it back. The Mishnah literally says when you pour the first cup, you make Hagafen, you make Kiddush, and then you bring the table, because in those days they had things that were smaller, like tray tables. People probably also were closer on the ground and not on chairs. So the table is brought after Kiddush. So it seems that I'm saying my own words. Rav Yashaber didn't say it this way, but for our when we give the answer to the Shechiyabu de Elisha, the fourth son, on page 13 in here, the one who can't ask, you begin for him, as it says, and you will tell your son on that day, saying, because of this, Hashem did for me when I left Mitzrayim, Yachal Rosh Chodesh. So why do we say I would have thought that you could start from Rosh Chodesh? Because the Mechilta on this pasuk says, "Vigat levincha." You should tell your son. Maybe from Rosh Chodesh, you should tell your son. Tamalomer b'yamahu on that day. Ibeyamahu yachmi bodyo. Maybe when it's still daytime. So Yachmi Rosh Chodesh, Rav said, based on the Ramban and stuff, even though they weren't physically free yet, the Egyptians didn't have control over that. Once we got our mitzvah, they had the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. They had the mitzvah to get the sheep and tie it to their bed. The slavery was in effect over, but they were still there. So there was a certain element of freedom that started on Rosh Chodesh. Tamalomer b'yamahu on that day. Ibeyamahu yachami bod yom. Why yachami bod yom? The Korban Pesach is brought in the afternoon, even before Pesach starts, even before the holiday starts, and even to the extent, according to some Rishonim, if someone would die before lo aleinu, if someone would die on Erev Yantif, as long as the burial is before Yantif, and they started Shiva for at least a moment before Yantif, Shiva canceled out the Yantif. But on Erev Pesach, it would start at noon or 12:30 because halachic time. Because since the Korban Pesach could be brought, then the holiday really starts then already. And so there's cases. Someone died in Erev Pesach, and they weren't able to bury them before the afternoon, and they said a full Shiva after Pesach. I think the Chayadim passes that way, and it's the way that for the Paskin, like it would be like someone dying on Yantif. You can't start Shiva until after Yantif. So there's an element of the Chag starting even before nightfall. So maybe you could tell your kid at the time of Shachting Korban Pesach about the miracles. So because the whole mitzvah is on that night, the having the matzah and maror in front of you is part of the mitzvah. So having the Seder, what we would call the Seder plate, is part of the mitzvah. So Rav Yashaber, I don't think. So he doesn't use that as a proof. He says one proof that the Rambam says every generation you have to show yourself, present yourself as if you just left Egypt. And so therefore, when you have a meal at that night, you need to eat and drink in a manner of free men. So part of Yigat Lebincha, you're showing you left freed, and therefore having the Seuda is a way of showing that you're free. And the Shulchan Aruch having the set and the matzah and the maror and the dalakosas is part of the Seuda. So therefore, having the Seuda after Kiddush, when it's time to have say Magid, that's a fulfillment of Hagaddah. Having this according to that, you shouldn't set your table until after Kiddush. So don't tell your wives this. I'm not saying that, but according to Rav Yashaber, according to the Rambam, that's what would come out. Now, it happens to be, again, another idea about setting the table. You shouldn't set your table until after Kiddush. To have a nice set table to show that you're free is part of showing that you're free. It's part of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. So you shouldn't do it until you start the Seder, until it's Magid time. But yeah, don't tell your wife that. I'm saying according to what Rav Yashaber said, that would be true. Now, another thing about setting the table, the Abarbanel says something interesting about Bnei Brak. When we said that they were sitting in Bnei Brak, that's earlier, on page 10, Ba'isa Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer, so Bnei Brak. So the Barbanel says that, why was it called Bnei Brak? He says Brak is like shiny, lightning, bright. So he says, Lavrik, so we have shiny silver and fancy kalim on our table for the Seder. So that's what the Barbanel says about Bnei Brak. Okay, the last thing two things. I've given different answers, and the different answers don't fit in with each other. They have opposite approaches. This year we have a new answer for why we don't mention Moshe in the Hagaddah. So it got published, I think Parshas Vayechi, that the Norman Lamb archives, they've scanned and put all this stuff from his letters and correspondence that he kept. We know some letters that he received that he didn't keep, and they're not in the archive, but he wrote over a share that he heard. It wasn't notes from the share, it was afterwards. I don't know if you didn't take notes. I mean, he mentioned in his hesped for Rav Yashaber that Rav Yashaber went in share was so fast they couldn't take notes. They would miss out if they were writing down what's happening. They missed the next few steps. So he says they didn't take notes, and the boys would all put their heads together after the share to recreate the share among themselves to make sure they didn't miss any points. So this was a Parsha share in the 50s in Boston, and talking about that chesed v'emes that Yosef did. That Yosef asked for chesed v'emes. Why is it chesed v'emes? Because you are showing that you're utterly hopeless. When you're dead, there's nothing you can do. You're completely dependent on other people. So it's a very high level of anivos, of being humble. Even though he was the king and the strong person, he was saying, I am so hopeless. I'm helpless. I can't do anything myself. It's showing that the Rona Shalom runs the world and that you're a nothing. I mean, the Navardikers would love it if it's a Gornish. But But so Moshe Rabbeinu, Rav Yashaber said in the share also, what happened in the night? He was busy trying to find the bones of Yosef to show that he, even though he's the leader, he was very humble. We need to fulfill the promise and bury him, showing that there's going to be a time when I have no power. So it could be that we don't mention that from what Moshe was doing on that night, he was showing his total humility and aniva. So maybe that's a reason why we don't mention Moshe in the Hagaddah. And as we say in vehigiyanu at the end of from a Gemara at the end of Shabbos, I mean we say at the end of Shabbos of Marav, and it's from a Gemara in I think Megillah and somewhere else. In three places in the Chumash, in the Nevi'im, and in the Ksuvim, where we mentioned Hashem's greatness is found from his humility. That he's so powerful. What does he do with some of that power? He feeds the orphans and the widows. So mitoch Gdulaso, we find Hamotzi Anvrusunaso, we find his humility. Okay, then the last idea, the Charoses. So there's a contradiction between the Rambam and Perusha Mishnah and the Rambam in the Yad HaZaka, if who we pass like. Because the Mishnah says it seems to be a machlokas between Rav Lazar ben Tzadok and the Chachamim if it's a mitzvah to take out Charoses. So in the Perusha Mishnah, he says we pass like the Chachamim, it's not a mitzvah to have Charoses. And if there was to have Charoses. And according to some Rishonim, if it would be a mitzvah, we would have to make a bracha on it. The same way we make alachilas matzah, alachilas maror. If there's a mitzvah to eat charoses, there would be alachilas charoses. So Rabbeinu Manoach, a commentary on the Rambam, says, well, you don't eat it by itself. So if it would be eaten by itself, it's true, but we're not supposed to eat it by itself. It's only eaten with, it's a mitzvah to eat it, but because it's eaten with the maror and it's tafel, it's secondary to the maror, we don't make a bracha alachilas charoses. But in the Yad HaZaka, the Rambam says it's a mitzvah to bring out the charoses, but he doesn't mention anything about making a bracha. So Rav Yashaber said it seemed, and it actually kind of fits in with what we just said about bringing out the food. Is that the charoses? There's two opinions in the Gemara what the mitzvah is. One says it's to remember the mortar, and one says it's to remember to the tapuach. So some say that the tapuach was the righteous women, that they, despite all the hardships, they made sure to be attractive for their husbands so that more Jewish babies would be born. And tapuach is in Shir Hashirim, one of the ways that Bnei Yisrael are mentioned is tapuach, like an apple. So therefore, that's why we put apples in, and the Rama and other Rishonim said we put in other fruits that Bnei Yisrael were mentioned by, like dates. And they also say you should put in ginger, because ginger, I guess with the color, it looks kind of like straw that was put in the mortar. And it's supposed to be thick. So I know we put in, we also put in nuts, because Bnei Yisrael is called egos. Ginas egos, and no one. I didn't have time to look that much, but we know we put in wine to make it all thick, right? If you need something, so we put in the charoses, yeah. Though it seems that the wine might be just more for practical purposes to give it a consistency. And it's not symbolizing something, but we could probably find people who say it does symbolize things. So Rabbi Yashaber says the fact that we're mentioning these things, the mitzvah is just to have it on the table. So it fits in well with what I just mentioned, even though I don't think he connected them. The table set with all these different things. And it's true, the Seder plate, we do have charoses, because everything on the Seder plate is needed for the Seder, besides for the egg and the zroa, which are to remember the Korban Pesach and the Korban Chagiga, which we don't eat. But so Rav Yashaber said that the Rambam changed his mind because he wrote the Perusha Mishnah when he was young. He wrote the Mishnah Torah when he was older, not that he was necessarily old, but older, so he seemed to change his mind, and he says it is a mitzvah to have it, but it's not necessarily a mitzvah to eat it. We don't need to make a bracha because the mitzvah isn't to eat it, but it's a mitzvah to have it on the table. So one of the things to recognize, remember, and to tell, 1 year I was probably before COVID already, but I spoke about, I wrote it up. It's in our extra report. I gave can you do a pantomime Hagaddah? They said, no, you have to verbalize things. But using props and things that will engage the kids and teach them lessons is something that you absolutely should do, and it enhances. It's part of the mitzvah of Seder Tes Mitzrayim. It's primarily verbal, but having props and things like that helps. So having the Rambam says, pointing to a servant that you have in the house, say, we were like that. Young kids, so they understand what happens. That's helping them, enhancing the realization of understanding what we were and how Hashem saved us. And so having the Charoses, we had to make mortar and bricks and put it down. So that's part of the helps the Seder Tes Mitzrayim. But besides for just being part of Seder Tes Mitzrayim, Charoses, because of Zechel Atid, is its own mitzvah in and of itself. But it's not something we make a bracha on. So we are a little late for Mincha, so we'll have to stop here.